There were 9 of us in that room. The lawyer sat at the head of the table. My wife's parents were to my left, her mother gripping a folded tissue she hadn't used yet, her father with his hands flat on the table like he was trying to hold it steady. Her sister and brother-in-law were across from me, 2 of her cousins near the door, a woman I didn't recognize who'd been introduced to me quickly in the hallway as someone from my wife's office, and me, at the opposite end from the lawyer, in a chair I'd chosen without thinking because it was the furthest from the door and I hadn't known where to put myself. The lawyer read through the standard language first, the part that means nothing and takes 4 minutes. Then he reached the section that mattered. He read one paragraph. Then he stopped, looked up, and the silence lasted exactly 2 seconds before every single person in that room turned and looked directly at me, not at my wife's parents, not at her sister, at me. I hadn't known what was in the will. My wife had written it 18 months earlier, during a health scare that had resolved itself, and she'd never told me what it said. I'd assumed, the way you assume things about the person you've been married to for 8 years, that I already knew. I didn't. My name is Daniel. I'm 45. My wife Claire passed away 11 weeks ago after an illness that moved faster than any of us were prepared for. 8 months from diagnosis to the end, not enough time to finish the conversations we'd been putting off, not enough time to say everything that needed saying, not enough time to understand that the ordinary Tuesday evenings we kept taking for granted were the thing we would miss most when they were gone. I won't speak at length about losing her. That grief is mine to carry privately, and some of it is still too close to put into words that feel adequate. What I will say is that the Claire I knew for 8 years was a woman who did everything deliberately. She didn't act without thinking. She didn't speak without meaning to. Every decision she made was made with the full weight of her attention behind it, which meant that whatever was in that will had not been written by accident. Whatever she had arranged on purpose. I just didn't know what it was until I was sitting in a room with 8 other people and a lawyer who was about to read it out loud. The standard bequests came first: items to her parents, pieces of jewelry to her sister, a set of books to her closest friend from university. Normal, the kind of careful, specific giving that told you she'd thought about every person in that room while she wrote it. Then the lawyer reached a clause I hadn't known existed. Claire had established a private charitable trust, funded, the lawyer explained, by a portion of her estate that neither I nor anyone else in the room had known she'd set aside. The trust had a name, it had a designated beneficiary organization, and it had a letter attached to be read aloud as part of the will's execution, addressed not to the room but specifically to me. The lawyer asked gently if I would like him to read it privately instead. I said no. Whatever Claire had wanted said, she had wanted said, she had chosen to include it here, in this room with these people. I wasn't going to change the terms of something she'd designed this carefully. He read it. It started simply. She said she hoped I wasn't embarrassed by being read to in a room full of people, and that if I was, I should know she'd thought about it carefully and decided I needed witnesses. She wrote that the trust had been established for an organization that supported early cancer research, specifically research into the type of illness she had been diagnosed with, the kind that is most survivable when caught early and most cruel when it isn't. She wrote that she'd begun funding it quietly, 18 months before her death, because she hadn't wanted to spend whatever time she had turning her own illness into a cause while she was still trying to live inside it, but she'd wanted it to continue after her. Then she wrote the part that turned the room. She said she was leaving the administration of the trust to me, not just as an executor but as its active steward. She said she was doing this because she knew me, and she knew that grief, for me, would become isolation if left to its own shape, and that the most loving thing she could think to do was give me something to be responsible for, not as a burden, but as a reason to stay in contact with the world after she left it. She wrote that she had seen, in the 8 years they'd been married, that I was someone who needed a purpose outside myself, and that without one, I would disappear into the quiet corners of our house and not come out for longer than was good for me. She said she was not trying to manage him from beyond the room. She was trying to love him in the only way she had left. She said, "The best thing I can give you now is something worth doing, so please, do it." The last line was, "I already know you will. That's why I chose you." After the lawyer finished, no one spoke for a long moment. I understood then why every person in that room had looked at me when the lawyer paused. Claire's parents, her sister, the cousins near the door, they hadn't known about the trust either. What they'd heard in real time was a woman they loved speaking to the man she'd married from a letter written when she still could have said it in person but chose to say it here instead. They'd looked at me because the letter was addressed to me, and because watching someone receive a message like that in a room full of grief from a voice that no longer existed is the kind of thing that pulls every eye in the room toward the person receiving it, whether anyone means to look or not. Claire's mother reached across the table and held my hand after the lawyer stopped reading. She didn't say anything, neither did I. Her sister asked me later, outside on the steps, whether I'd had any idea. I told her no. She said, "She told me she'd written you something. She didn't tell me what." I asked her if she thought it was like Claire to do it this way. She smiled in a way that looked like grief and certainty at the same time. She said, "Completely. The trust has been active for 8 weeks. I've attended 2 meetings, answered 50 emails, and made one decision that I believe was the right one. Though Claire isn't here to confirm it, and I've started to understand that I'll spend the rest of my stewardship making decisions without her and hoping they land close to what she would have wanted. It is the hardest thing I've ever done. It is also, on the worst mornings, the thing that gets me out of bed. She knew it would be. She knew me well enough to design something that would pull exactly that response from the specific shape of my grief. I find that enraging and comforting in roughly equal measure, and I think that's probably how she intended it. I've thought a lot about why she did it publicly. Why the letter was in the will and not in a sealed envelope left on my nightstand. I think she understood that I would need witnesses, not to the letter itself, but to the moment of being known by someone who loved you, known clearly enough that they could design what comes after you lose them. She wanted 9 people in a room to see that she saw me. That was the real thing she was leaving behind.